Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Richard Moglen, and welcome to this week's episode of Stock Market Today. And I decided to change the name of the series just a little bit because we're not predicting what the stock market is going to do next week, but we are analyzing that current trend. And using that current trend, we're going to decide whether or not to be aggressive and look for new positions or be a little bit more defensive and trim off our weaker holdings. So as always, in this episode, we'll look at the IBD Big Picture article from investors.com. We'll look at the current GMI signal from wishingwealthblog.com, and then we'll go back into TC2000, look at how the key index ETFs are doing, the SPY, the QQQ, the IWM, and then finally we'll round out the video with going over how my most recent watch list performed in the past trading week. So as always, we're going to start with the IBD Big Picture article. And this past Friday, we did have a down day based on some growing fears in China related to the coronavirus, but overall still a very strong recovery week from both the NASDAQ and the SP-500. On that Friday, the Dow Jones and Russell were hit the hardest, and they were down 1.2% and 0.9%, while the NASDAQ and S&P fell about 0.5% each. But overall volume on the New York Stock Exchange was lower on Friday than it was on Thursday, and we did have a positive jobs report from the Labor Department. Overall, still the leaders in stocks are acting very nicely. They talk about Microsoft, Adobe, AMD, and Nvidia, and overall, still nothing to be terribly worried about. This past week, I was wrong in my stock market outlook video, and I played it very defensive, probably a little bit too defensive, but the market has confirmed that we are still in an uptrend, and that is the current market pulse from investors.com. So even though I was wrong, I let the market tell me what direction it was going to go, and I became decently aggressive this past week and picked up a few more positions. And overall, we have 4 distribution days on the S&P 500 and now 4 on the NASDAQ. And you can see that they mention a couple stocks right here on leaders up in volume, Bill.com and PFSI, both of which have been on my radar in the past weeks. So that is pretty much it from investors.com. They do talk about a few recent IPOs that are showing good price action. Dynatrace has reported earnings, but DDOG and Bill.com have yet to. So just have to be careful with that. And they also talk about how Dexcom, NVDA, and TPX, which are all leaderboard stocks, have earnings next week. So this is just a reminder to check when the earnings date for any stock that you own is, because you don't want to wake up some morning and have your stock be down 10% because you didn't know that date. So look those up and have a plan for how to deal with those earnings reports. But that's it from investors.com. And going over to wishingwealthblog.com, you can see that the GMI signal is still green since October 16th. The current GMI score is a 6 out of 6. So everything good from both wishingwealthblog.com and a confirmed uptrend from investors.com. So now we can go over to TC2000 and analyze the trend of the indexes for ourselves. So starting off with the QQQ, after the down day this past week, we recovered very nicely this week and had a gain of about 4% on the QQQ. And if you go to the weekly chart, it's really apparent how well we recovered. And even with this Friday, we still had a very, very good week and a lot of breakouts from some big growth names. And going to the Guppy chart, you can see we're still in a clear red, white, blue pattern. However, on the S&P 500, actually the SPY, you can see that it almost broke that red, white, blue pattern, but recovered nicely this past week. However, the IWM wasn't quite as fortunate as the major indexes, and you can see that it did break the red, white, blue pattern in the IWM, which is the Russell 2000 index. So looking at the normal chart, you can see that it had 2 bad weeks and then failed to really recover nicely at the end of this week. And Friday, it was hit very hard, down 1.2%. So that is how the major indexes are doing. And looking at the FFTY, which is the Innovator IBD 50 ETF, you can see that this was down as well. and it actually had a pretty bad day Wednesday, and continued to fall both on Thursday and Friday. So overall from the indexes, the SPY and the QQQ are doing pretty well, but you are still seeing some weakness in the IWM and the FFTY. So we're not out of trouble yet, and I would like to see both the IWM and FFTY continue their uptrends before really getting aggressive. But this past week was a very good week for growth stocks. And now let's go over the watch list that I had for this past week. So GSX and ENPH I added late. So I wasn't really looking at them at the beginning. I was aware that ENPH had the potential for a green line breakout, which it did have on Tuesday of this week. And since then, it's done very, very well and increased a further 3%. So very good to see follow-on days on volume here. So really good things from ENPH, and it's also, I believe, number 5 on my list for fundamentals. So a really good growth name, some crazy EPS numbers as well as sales numbers. Not the best return equity, but those EPS and sales numbers are very, very strong. But going back to this, GSX gained 22% this past week. I did try to get in on this day here, but I entered a little bit late and was actually stopped out on this day. So another very strong growth name, and I will look for another entry into this stock. PFSI also had a very, very good week after it reported earnings, I believe, on this Wednesday. And you can see on this Friday, it really took off. And it's showing really good relative strength because this was a down day for the overall market. And look at this volume coming in. This is not regular investors buying. This is institutions, hedge funds, mutual funds taking up shares into this stock. And you can see that I've been stalking this stock for a long time. It's just been under and going sideways for like 2 months almost. And then finally, when it had great earnings, it finally broke through and continued on with its run. So that's PFSI. CDLX, I did buy some on this breakout here, and it had a nice follow-on day on this past Friday. And looking at TTD, it's kind of been oscillating back and forth. It had a really nice breakout on Tuesday, but then had a really bad day on Wednesday where it broke through and below the green line on above average volume. And one thing that I really don't like to see is that this volume on this down day is greater than this volume on the up day. And that's the opposite of what you want to see. Moving on, we've got HHR, which is still kind of below these resistance levels here that I've outlined, but it rallied really nicely from the beginning of the week. Next, we've got AMD, which is a very strong growth name. If you look to my list, it's number 8 and had earnings this past quarter of plus 300%, which is excellent. And its chart looks very, very good. It's near all-time highs, consolidating nicely. And if it continues to move up, I will most likely take up a position when it breaks through this resistance level at around 52. Next, we've got Ping, a recent IPO, and it's just kind of been going sideways for a few weeks. But there's no big signs of selling. And if it puts out another green dot, I may bite at a few shares. Next, we've got PGNY, another recent IPO, which is once again trying to kind of tighten up here. And if it goes through this level here, or maybe even around here, I may pick up a few shares. Next, we've got ACMR, which had a very big run in December, going from, going up 200% in December alone, and it needed some time to digest this gain. However, you can see it's really tightened up very nicely on this right-hand side, and this will definitely be on my watch list in the upcoming trading week. Next, we've got Cash, which tried to break out on this Thursday, but then was knocked down. And this past week, it kind of tried to move back up towards that green line, but didn't really have a definitive move one way or the other. Next, we've got Lulu, which again is a really nice chart. It's consolidating right near all-time highs. Tried to break through on this Tuesday, but then spent the rest of the week just getting knocked back down. Next, we've got PLMR, which is another very, very good growth name with some really good estimates for the upcoming quarter. And once again, it's a recent IPO consolidating right near all-time highs. This is like my favorite setup. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on how this acts going into earnings. And I'll probably wait until earnings come out before picking up new shares. Next, we've got Dexcom, which also has earnings coming up soon. And this past few weeks, it's really just been quieting down right near all-time highs. And it seems like it's kind of waiting for earnings to come out before moving one way or the other. So this will be another one that I'm watching. I think it still has very good estimates. Let's go ahead and look at that. Dexcom. So estimates are up 35%, which is okay. I would like to see a little bit more growth than that, but we'll have to see what actually happens with that earnings report. Next, we've got CZZ, which is still consolidating right under this 23 level. PASS is also just kind of consolidating. AEM is still oscillating back and forth in this Darvis box. And finally, we've got ST&E, which is kind of breaking down. So that is how the stock market performed this past week. Definitely a very good recovery. And we saw some key breakouts in those big growth names. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow when I'll be posting my next weekly watch list. But other than that, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in future videos.